Ooh, oh, yeah, I don't want to talk about it. We're back again in the most challenging mod in Factorio, and we're ready to take on the tech tree. Once again, you guys seem like you were ready for more of this series, so I've decided to take the highway back to hell. Also, we're super close to 1,000 subscribers, so if you don't mind hitting that juicy button down there, I'd be very grateful. Speaking of which, thank you guys so much for enjoying my other two videos. I read all your comments, and I'm happy I'm able to entertain you with my suffering. Anyways, in the last episode, I set up coal and steel processing and touched on ceramic. In this one, I plan to research all of the prerequisites for basic circuits, so let's do it. Toward the end of the last episode, I finished researching glass processing, which means I can start mining quartz. I began crafting a crystal mine, which is the only way to mine it, when I remembered some of your guys' suggestions and decided to add a mod that displays the playtime in the top corner. While I was enabling the mod, however, I realized that this entire time I had forgotten to enable Pyanodon's alternative energy. It basically just further complicates a bunch of recipes, but it also adds a ton of other ways to make power. This made me worried that I just had to continue the series without it, because as I generated the world without it, it might not have generated the new ores. I decided to simply enable it and see what happens. Anyways, after the 2 decades it took to craft, I placed the crystal mine on the quartz ore patch located an irritating distance away. Then I remembered I would have to take an entire belt down to my base, plus electric poles, just to get to the quartz. It took an ungodly amount of time with all the traveling to and from my base for materials, but I eventually got it done. I crafted a glassworks, which smelts down the quartz into molten glass. Looks like it's got a face. It's like, my name is Glassworks Facility. The molten glass can then be crafted into all your basic glass products. I was about to set it up when I got distracted by a new building from alternative energy called a fish turbine. It was a fish, alright. It actually produced a decent amount of energy at zero cost of anything else, so I plan to place more in the future. Oh yeah, glassworks. Glassworks take liquid fuel to smelt the glass down, and since I didn't have any use for it and I had an abundance, I decided to use coal gas. I crafted 3 more glassworks, but I was unprepared for the sheer truckload of gas it consumed. I decided it would be faster overall if I just had one. I also crafted another crystal mine because I didn't like how only half the belt was filled. I put 1 glassworks back to be used for regular glass. Once again, it requires an insane amount of coal gas. Looking back on it, the problem with coal gas wasn't the amount I could produce, it was how slow the inserters worked. They either couldn't input or output coal fast enough, meaning coal gas had to wait before being made. But I didn't want to worry about that, and instead I made a few more fish things. We got some fish working. This whole time I've been slowly yet surely researching my way closer to circuits. However, another thing I wanted was a car. A car would let me traverse the world to find special ores I would need, among which are lead, tin, and zinc. Engines, however, also require aluminum, which for some reason looks like a monkey tried to make a paper airplane. Fortunately, I had an aluminum patch just a little bit to the left of my base. Unfortunately, though, aluminum requires coal gas to mine. That means I would have to spend 10 coal gas for each aluminum ore that I mine, not to mention that the ratio of ore to plates is 10 to 1, on top of the unscrupulous, mind-boggling amount being used for glass. So I decided to discontinue my efforts for glass, given that I had already created around a stack and a half of it. Then I forgot that fluid mining drills also need coal, so I just left it, thinking that it wasn't getting enough gas. I figured it out eventually, trust me. Then I decided I wasn't getting enough iron ore for whatever reason and destroyed all of my mining drills. Before you say, Zave, why are you breaking your base? It's for a good reason. Then I was like, screw it, and destroyed my assemblers and labs too. I wanted more space where the assemblers were, and I also wanted to use the whole vein of iron, which was also being covered by them. But then, realizing what I just committed to, I took a break. And when I got back on, I was prepared to finish what I had started. I quickly made a mining stack for steel and took a line of coal off the proto-splitter. I hooked it up and placed all the mining drills and it was up and running. Then I removed the labs and placed down a blueprint of all the assembling machines I made earlier. This placement was a lot more convenient as it was way closer to the furnace stacks. Before I had to run halfway across the base whenever I needed to restock the assemblers, and now it was like 2 feet away. I then placed everything back and stocked the chest up. I also put the labs back with a more efficient design. Then I set up assembling machines for steam engines and engine units. Both use pipes, so I just added a machine for those too. Almost every more expensive machine requires steam engines for some reason, so I decided that making them in the background would be super useful. Obviously, the engines are for the car. While I was waiting for engines to craft, I started looking at recipes for concrete, which I would need for plenty of buildings down the line. I began setting up another stone mine that I would use for gravel and sand, 2 ingredients in concrete, and then I immediately forgot about it when I had enough stuff to build the car.
Oh my god! Wow!
I got back to the base after clearing my mine and built the glassworks back to get rid of my coal gas after getting enough aluminum. Still, glass production was as slow as can be. I then got back to working on concrete stuff and built a machine called a jaw crusher. I needed 2 of them, one to turn stone into gravel and one to turn gravel into sand. The next ingredient I need is called lime. It's made in a high pressure furnace and takes coke and limestone to make and outputs carbon dioxide as a byproduct. Since I knew I would need a bunch of CO2 in the future, I didn't vent it off. Then I made an assembler for the concrete and hand fed the gravel and sand. I ran a water pipe up to it and it was done. Alright, there we go. It's making it. I was sick of having barely enough iron to squeak by, so I blueprinted a second iron stack under the first one. It was tough to weave all the belts around each other to get it to work, but it wasn't too long before it was up and running. Here at my channel, we only serve the finest spaghetti. At this point, I remembered that I would need many other ores to get circuits, and the only one I hadn't found yet was zinc. I didn't even know what fluid I needed to mine it, so I set out on a car trip to find it, hopefully nearby. I finally found some, but what do you know, it was insanely far away. It requires aromatics to mine. Aromatics are a product of tar processing, the beginning of the organic chemistry part of this mod. Anyways, I decided to keep looking around for ores added by alternative energy, mainly antimony. Not much time passed before I found a geothermal fissure. It's not antimony, but it's also a component of alternative energy, so I suppose that antimony must also have been generated. When I got back to the base, I decided to get started on tar processing. I made a destructive distillation column to turn the tar into carbon dioxide, aromatics, flue gas, and rich clay. I vented off the flue gas and carbon dioxide, put the clay in a chest, and kept the aromatics. Before you come at me in the comments, yes, I know I'll need carbon dioxide, but I think I'll be making enough that venting off the little bit I produced just now will be okay. I made another one and hooked it up, and aromatics were being produced. I didn't have any use for them at the moment, so I just let them back up in the pipe.
You notice anything weird about the map?
Then I made a massive machine called the tar processing unit to be used for another tar processing recipe. This one turns the tar plus steam into pitch, metal oil, creosote oil, which if you're an OG of this channel, you'll remember from my Minecraft Industrial Revolution series, and anthracene oil. It's all pretty complicated, but basically what I need are the creosote and metal oil. The metal oil can be made into light oil, carbolic oil, and naphthalene oil. The light oil can then be further processed into more aromatics for zinc. The creosote will be used for treated wood, which is an ingredient in formica for circuits. In yet another recipe, the pitch can also be processed into coke, hydrogen, light oil, naphthalene oil, and anthracene oil. But I didn't want to get into all of that, as I figured I already had enough coke, and I didn't have a use for anything else besides the light oil. Anyways, I hooked the machine up and it started making the stuff. I wanted to store as much creosote as I could, so I made a weird proto-tank with a bunch of pipes. For whatever reason, Mr. Pyanodon made tanks only become available after circuits, so it was the only way to do it. I left the organics for now and went to my science machine. I had many more researchers ahead of me before circuits, and the science maker was excruciatingly slow, so I removed the whole thing, planning to make a much better one. In this new design, instead of inserting directly into the machines, the ingredients would get put on a belt. It was a lot bigger than the old one, and of course, much faster. However, bigger production means bigger consumption, so I had to restock with much more materials and a lot more often. But even so, it was a lot better. In no time, our research was completed.
Hey, Moss is done. That was quick. That was really fast, actually.
Now that Moss was done researching, I decided to stop venting off carbon dioxide since it was a big part of the recipe. Instead, I connected it to the carbon dioxide that was being produced from lime. Then I realized that my stone brick drills were completely out of stone, and the nearest patch was like a mile away. I wasn't about to run a belt of stone over, so I decided that I would drive over to the stone whenever I needed to restock. I quickly built a larger stone brick smelting setup capable of yielding 600 stone bricks per run. I wanted to start working on seaweed farming because it's used for a bunch of stuff in the next science pack. However, it requires tin.
Ooh, that's fun. It's about 5 miles away.
The closest patch of tin was incredibly far away, and it requires steam to mine. That means not only will I have to run a belt of tin plates to my base, but I would also have to run a steam pipe. I didn't want to do that, so I scoured the surrounding area for a closer patch. It wasn't too long before I found a patch that was relatively close, and let's just say I was a little happy.
Yes, Lord! Thank you, Jesus! Oh, bless the Lord!
Not only that, but I wouldn't have to run a steam pipe all the way over because there was a coal patch directly above it and it was on the water, so I could produce the steam on site. That also meant I could use the coal to fuel my fluid mining drills and the furnaces if I were to smelt the plates there as well. Technically, the coal mine was even further away from the tin than the one at my base, but my coal patch didn't have any space for more mining drills, and there was no way in heck I was proto-splitting that. So, I blueprinted the tremendously large belt of coal that would be taken down to the tin and got ready to embark on the largest project yet. I set up a somewhat large mining stack in the coal patch that had the same design as the ones in my base. This was around enough to saturate an entire belt. I began the arduous journey of crafting belts, placing them, and returning to my base for more materials. I repeated this process for around half an hour, restocking my science in small parts all the while. Finally, I had a belt that was close to the tin patch. I set up a bunch of boilers, but they would consume a hefty amount of coal. It turns out that my 10 boiler setup was enough to supply the number of mining drills that I wanted, which was nice. Then I got distracted and started showing my friend around the base.
Can you tell me what this chest does? Tell me what this chest does.
That chest right there? That chest right there?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, obviously it has no purpose.
No purpose. Incorrect.
After that, I finished the furnace stack and started to build the mining drills and steam pipes. I also had to send a line of coal down to the mining drills, which took forever. After I was done with all that, I had to build the huge belt for 10 plates. I already made around a stack of 10 plates and decided to stop working on the belt for now. Instead, with the circuits research on the horizon, I spent the next 20 minutes refilling the science assembler and waiting. At around 10.5 hours in, circuits were complete. 96, 97, 99, 99, 99. What a... Oh, oh, circuits. Oh, oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Alright, I'm leaving. I'm out. And that's it for this episode. Yes, I know how long it took to come out, and that's my bad. I hope you liked it despite that, and if you made it to the end of the video, comment Pyanodon, more like Pyanodon. Alright, bye.